You're listening to the ADHD Support Talk Radio podcast. ADHD Support Talk is brought to you by addclasses.com. Visit www.addclasses.com and sign up for free webinars and online events today. Hello, and welcome back to ADHD Support Talk Radio. I'm your co-host, Lynne Edris, and as a productivity coach, I help overwhelmed professionals reduce procrastination, improve time management, and get more done with less effort so that they have more time, energy, and money for what they love the most. I am a woman with ADHD myself, guys, so I have been where many of you are. I have been where so many of my clients are, and I've come out the other side, so to speak. You know, life is not perfect. My ADHD did not go away, but I've learned to live well with it, and that's what I want for every single one of you. I want you to feel that feeling of success and fulfillment that you are capable of having. So you can learn more about me and what I do and the programs and services I offer at www.coachingadvantages.com. And when you text the keyword hack, that's HACK, to 33777, I'll send you my 7 foolproof productivity hacks to help you add hours of free time to your weeks by investing just a few smart minutes each day. Well, today I am very excited to have Dr. Sharon Saline back with me. In a moment, we're going to talk about something that's very near and dear to both of our hearts, and I'm sure many of yours as well. Something that I can for sure identify with very much, and that's perfectionism and ADHD. So welcome back, Sharon.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here.
Always happy to have you. We chatted up quite a bit before we do these recordings. I could talk to you all day. But today we're going to talk about perfectionism. So before we do that, tell our listeners a little bit about you, where they can learn more about you, all that good stuff.
I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm the author of What Your ADHD Child Wishes You Knew, Working Together to Empower Kids for Success in School and Life, and the ADHD Solution Deck, which are 50 tools for families living with ADHD. You can find me on my website, www.drsharonsaline.com. I also host a weekly Facebook Live for Attitude Magazine on Friday afternoons on various topics of living with ADHD for adults and for parents as well. You can find me on my own Facebook page at Dr. Sharon Saline, YouTube, Dr. Sharon Saline, and of course, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter.
All the things, right? So today you have some great tips and some great insights to share about perfectionism and ADHD. So just go ahead and jump right in.
Well, I think that a lot of people with ADHD struggle with perfectionism. And we know that perfectionists are often driven by a fear of disappointing themselves or others. Maybe it's way underneath there in the bottom of our bellies, but it's there. And I'm a perfectionist myself. I like to say I'm a recovering perfectionist, but I'm not really recovering very quickly.
It's a lifelong process here as well, that's for sure.
Some, perfectionism can be all or nothing thinkers. If it's not completely right, then it must be a failure. I've advanced in that category. I know things aren't a failure if they're not completely right. But I still like things to be a certain way. And a lot of people share that. We perfectionists often set unreasonable standards, and we're constantly comparing ourselves negatively with others. Just like individuals with ADHD compare themselves critically with neurotypical peers. Perfectionists often tend to focus on the end result, not so much the process of getting there. And so then they discount the learning that's happening because they're fixated on the accomplishment and what it's going to look like.
Absolutely. And the end point, right? So then if the end point isn't perfect, then nothing that led up to that end point is worthwhile, or even, I always say worth giving yourself credit for.
No, and there's a perception of failure.
Yes.
If the end point isn't a particular way, then all the stuff I did before then, or the actual product that I've created or thing that I've done isn't, it doesn't matter. So, you know,
Right.
if I write, you know, an article and it doesn't get, you know, 14,000 views, then somehow, you know, one could say it's not a successful or meaningful article. But that's not really fair, because the 3,000 people who looked at it, or the 500 people, or the 5 people who looked at it, derived meaning from it, and it helped them. And so, you know, today's world, where everything is about numbers and popularity online, can be very difficult for perfectionists, because, you know, there are these measurements that somebody has, you know, is sort of showing you, and how you are, you know, you're making the grade or you're not.
Yeah, social media is definitely not the friend of the perfectionist.
No, it is not. And I think that perfectionism really stems, you know, at the core issue, particularly for people who live with ADHD, from underlying issues of shame or low self-confidence.
Yeah.
And, you know, perfectionistic adults with ADHD often live in fear of failing to meet standards that they set for themselves or other people set for them at work.
Or they interpret
Or they
as,
interpret.
yeah, what other people want or expect.
Right, particularly if they've struggled to meet those goals in the past.
Yeah.
So often these expectations are just unrealistic, based on shoulds, instead of what folks can actually do.
Absolutely.
You know, Loretta LaRoche says we masturbate and then we should all over ourselves. And excuse me,
Love that. We masturbate and then we should all over ourselves. I love that. That's a riot.
I love that. And we do, because I must do this, I must do that. And then, oh my gosh, it should be a particular way if I must do it. And that is so hard for our emotional system, and for our self-confidence, right? How are we going to feel good about ourselves if we're boxing ourselves into that corner? So
Absolutely.
There's a difference between being responsible and showing up, and being a perfectionist.
That's
and I
huge.
think that can be really gray area for people with ADHD. And
absolutely,
about it, who are just perfectionists.
Absolutely. One of the things I hear a lot, and I'm sure you hear this as well, is, you know, I will have a client or I'll speak with someone on a consultation, and I will call out the perfectionism that I'm hearing, and they will say, like, I'm not a perfectionist. And I actually used to say this. The first time I started hearing people call me a perfectionist was when I was probably in my 20s. And I never had really thought about it at all. But my response was always, how can I be a perfectionist when I'm a hot mess? I am so not a perfectionist. I'm a mess, right? Or if you really knew, you wouldn't call me a perfectionist. But for a lot of us, that's one way to know that you're a perfectionist, right? If you would, you know, find yourself doing nothing rather than doing something the wrong way or not the way it should be done, you're a perfectionist. My perfectionism showed up huge in my early 20s, mid 20s, in the whole, like, taking care of a household, housework, chores, and cleaning end of things. Right. So that whole, I don't have the time and the energy to scrub that floor from corner to corner on my hands and knees with a bucket of water and the 2 towels, one to dry, one to, you know, to buff. You know, how often do you think that really happened? Right. So then I would wait until I couldn't take it anymore, or people were coming over, and then I'd have the mad, crazy, insane, like, burn yourself out kind of cleaning. That's perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm not going to clean. I'm not going to file. I'm not going to write. I'm not going to answer that email because I don't have the energy or the bandwidth or the time to do it the right way right now.
Yeah.
It's huge.
It's huge. It's huge. I mean, I think sometimes mine shows up in my cooking. Like, I like to cook, and sometimes I want to try a new recipe, and, you know, I'll try it, I'll follow it, you know, and sometimes it just doesn't taste that good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessarily because I made a mistake, and maybe the recipe isn't that good. But then, you know, if I decide I'm having friends over for dinner and I'm like, oh, I'm going to try this new recipe, and then it's like, okay, but not great, I'm like in a whole shame spiral about it. Oh, do that. I shouldn't just made something I know I can cook well, but it really should, I like it to be perfect when they come. And then it's like, ding, the light bulb is right there. That's the problem. Like, they had a nice meal at your house that they didn't have to cook.
Right. And it was about being with you.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think probably the vast majority of people with ADHD can relate to this, even if they don't relate to the term perfectionist. Taking a look at your musts and your shoulds and the things that you don't do or avoid doing or delay doing, is a big indicator. I know the shoulding part is huge for a lot of us. Absolutely.
It's huge. And I think perfectionism is a way that adults with ADHD and children as well try to control the outcome.
Absolutely.
A fundamental aspect of managing anxiety. Perfectionism and anxiety are intimately related.
Absolutely.
Because when you live with ADHD, you experience moments when you're aware that you're struggling or you've messed up or you don't necessarily know why or how to fix what you've done. And so then there's a persistent worry that develops over time. And I see this in the kids I work with, the teenagers, the emerging adults, and then, adults, which it just like all through the lifespan, which is this persistent worry of when is the next time I'm going to receive negative feedback when I wasn't expecting it, that indicates that I messed up when I wasn't even aware that I was doing something that was problematic. And so this mentality feeds a desire to be perfect, and in an effort to eliminate any scenarios where you're going to be criticized.
Absolutely.
Because, we have that, that sensitivity to criticism, that many humans have. And instead of feeling like, oh, I'm messed up, I'm stupid, or I'm a bad cook, or, I don't keep a neat household, we have to shift to a growth mindset, which is like, okay, I messed up. What have I learned?
Yes.
Maybe this is not the right recipe for me. Or maybe, I can just mop the floor with one of those, sponge mops and
squirty things. Yeah.
Right. Or the Swifter. And so we have to realize that feedback from people, from the universe towards ourselves, like if you do something and the message isn't quite exactly what you want, or it doesn't go exactly the way you hope, that's an opportunity for us to grow and improve ourselves. It's not a manifestation of failure.
Absolutely. And it's not a manifestation of your character, right? It's not who you are. It's not what you value. It's not who you are at the core deep down. It's just something that didn't go quite as well as you had hoped or expected or intended. And there's always something to learn. And I think that, kind of that growth mindset, that what can I learn? How can I turn this into something positive, is a really important part of the shift we need to make to be able to live with ADHD and not have that tendency toward perfectionism always like derailing us.
Absolutely. And I think, if we continue to peel back the layers of this onion, under the anxiety, like when is the next time I'm going to mess up? Or, what could I get negative feedback, or it's not going to work out, is this real challenge of tolerating disappointment.
Yeah.
Disappointment that we have for ourselves and disappointment that other people have for us, because it feels terrible.
Of course it does.
It feels terrible. And then it's, because there's often a lot of blaming that goes on when you in certain families growing up or in work situations, you easily move into shame. And shame is like a more than a wet blanket. I'm looking for the word, but it's basically like a deadening experience.
Absolutely
go into that shame spiral, and then you're in the snake pit. And
Absolutely.
I always think of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Harrison Ford drops into the cave, and it's filled with asps, and he's petrified of snakes. He's like, oh, snakes, why does it have to be snakes, right? And so we all kind of drop into that snake pit, and we are cruel to ourselves.
Absolutely.
We tell ourselves things, and that people often have told us. And so we want to learn how to support ourselves when we feel insecure, when we have disappointed someone without going into a character assassination.
Absolutely.
That,
Absolutely.
I think, is deeply related to perfectionism.
Absolutely. Right. And the thing that shame, I always call it the blame and shame cycle, does, when you are in the blame and shame cycle, you are absolutely 180 degrees from where you need to be to solve the problem, to learn anything from it, and to make changes. You cannot be blaming yourself and shaming yourself and be proactively problem solving and learning. It's absolutely impossible. Those things are diametrically opposed to one another. So learning how to catch that and learning how to shift that is absolutely huge. And you have some I don't want to call them tips, but you have some pointers that you want to share.
I haven't, I'm formulating them so they're not like in a cool little acronym.
Right.
But I'll work on that. Don't worry. But I think, I have like 6 tips, 6 tools for you.
Okay.
And for the listeners. So the first thing is build awareness about your perfectionism. I told that story about cooking. I'm like, oh, well, it's good, but it isn't really that good because it wasn't really perfect. There's the light bulb. So notice when you are having conversations with yourselves about how something should be a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
Why, what's wrong that you're starting to do. Like, what, there's a difference between, I could have tweak this or could have gone a little better and this was bad.
Right.
So we want to build awareness of our perfectionist tendencies and really notice when they come up.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second thing is we want to increase our awareness, our acknowledgement of when things are going well. And so this means we're going to look at what's working instead of focusing on what's missing.
Huge.
Right? And I think one way to do this, and I do this myself, is at the end of every day. I've been doing it for I think since COVID started. I started during COVID, right before COVID, that January 2020. So it was fortuitous. I journal. I write 3 things that happened that day that I considered to be good. Now it could be like my hair. Well, I had a good hair day. It could be simple like that. It could be I had a great time with Lynne doing a podcast. It could be my dog and I had a beautiful walk. And it could be small things. It could be bigger things. It doesn't matter. You put those down so that you have some acknowledgement. And then, what I think is helpful is to say afterwards, some sort of like, I'm grateful for these.
Yeah.
Gratitude or or something like that, because we have to shift our focus from that fixed negative mindset to a growth mindset, noticing what's working.
That's huge. And I call that inward gratitude. And that's something that I encourage my clients to practice, right? And we all know the benefits of gratitude. I mean, the research is very clear on the benefits of gratitude and what it does for your mindset, what it does for your neurochemistry, what it does for your body, all of it. Mm-hmm. But most of us with ADHD really need to turn some of that inward. So that practice of finding 3 things to be grateful for that are about you. It could be something you did. It could be something that you like about yourself or you don't dislike about yourself. Sometimes the bar is going to be a little lower than other times. Sometimes the bar is going to be a little bit higher. It doesn't need to be something earth-shattering, but that conscious acknowledgement and that shift into the feelings of gratitude about yourself are really cornerstone to not just like feeling better about yourself and getting a handle on the perfectionism, but to also learning about what works for you, right? That's where you learn about your strengths. And that's where you learn how to manage your ADHD, when you can learn to start to rely on those strengths. But if all you're focused on is what you're not great at or what doesn't go well, you can't learn how to support yourself and how to grow and how to be a better version of you by relying on your strengths.
I think that's so true. And I also think that inward gratitude, it fills your bucket.
Absolutely.
we live in a world where we are constantly emptying our bucket.
Yes.
We're putting out, we're looking at other people, we're comparing, social media, blah, blah, blah. Only gratitude or, acknowledging ourselves is what puts some substance into that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really a challenge for many adults with ADHD, because the messages about what they need to do better have been around a long time.
Yes.
And so the focus isn't easily on self-acceptance of where I am. Now, that doesn't mean it's okay to walk through life letting people down and being late and not turning your stuff in. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about that idea of, I have strengths, I have challenges, and that's what makes me unique. And I think, and that's hard. And then that's hard for many, many people. Like, it's not just those people who have ADHD. It's hard for a lot of us.
It really is. It really is. But it's if it's not easy, and if you're like me and you're, I remember when I started doing this was many, many, many years ago, when I knew I needed to start like focusing on gratitude. So I was trying to implement a gratitude practice with a gratitude journal every night. And I realized that everything that I was grateful for didn't have anything to do with me. And I was kind of at a place where I knew I needed to shift that. But some days it was really hard, right? So some days it was sarcastic, and some days it had a little bit of an eye roll, and some days it was a little bit humorous, like, well, at least, I didn't burn the house down today and everybody's fed, right? Even if it was Mac and Easy Mac or whatever, everybody's fed, right? And sometimes it was a little sarcastic, sometimes it was a little bit of an eye roll, but over time it did make a shift.
Right. And so that goes into the third tool, which is to accept mistakes as part of living and learning. Yeah. And that's a real challenge, because many of us who are perfectionists, it's like a mistake has to be fixed.
Yes.
A mistake has to be corrected. And if we can't correct it, if we can't redeem it, then we are somehow unredeemable. Like, we link that to, being unworthy ourselves. And that's why I think it's important to really remember that you're not alone in the world with your mistakes. Like, everybody has them. I think that, it's like my daughter, when she was in high school and she decided that she was going to go off social media for a while. And she wrote this piece for one of her English classes. And it was so great. She's like, no one ever posts online when you're having a breakout, or you're in the middle of your period and you feel terrible, or you get a C instead of an A+.
Right.
And, it's just like, of course, no one posts that. That's right. And so that makes it harder to accept our mistakes, because now we see everywhere about how great everyone else's life is.
Absolutely. And it's all filtered, right? If it's not filtered with the camera, it's filtered in terms of what they're showing you, because you're not seeing actual real life. People aren't putting their double chins on Facebook.
No,
it's a fact.
Right. And this goes to the fourth thing, which is to set realistic goals and lower the pressure on yourself. We can't do everything. And we can't do everything perfect, because there is no such thing as perfection. There really isn't. We do our best, and we have to let things kind of, the chips fall where they may. So set realistic goals for yourself. I can feed my family, make sure that there's no glass on the floor, and clean up the kitchen at the end of the day. That's a realistic goal when I have 2 to 3 children under the age of 6. Right. And
cleaning up the kitchen doesn't mean that HGTV can walk in 5 minutes and film and have everything be beautiful. Right. You get to redefine how you clean up the kitchen when you have 3 kids under 6. Right?
Or you also get to redefine, what are reasonable hours to work each day.
Absolutely.
Or what is, when is a report fine to turn in? Like, a lot of people with ADHD have trouble actually completing things because they're not right enough.
Yes.
And at some point you have to say, okay, I'm going to work this much time. And then when it's done, I'll review it and I'm turning it in, even if it's not what I think it should be. Because what you think it should be may be absolutely unattainable.
Absolutely. Good point.
Now, the fifth thing is to find tools to receive feedback neutrally. So we live in a world with other people and events and environments, and we will receive feedback about that, right? So we'll do things and people will let us know they like it, they don't, it was good, it wasn't good, it was, effective or it was ineffective. So the thing is, how are you going to take that in? If everybody's opinion is going to be your opinion of yourself, it's going to be hard to get out of bed in the morning. But if you hear what people have to say as information that you can take or leave, that some part of it may be true, take that part in, okay? And figure out how to work with it. And that might be finding a good coach or finding a good therapist. Because, I notice I'm doing this and I'm not, I'm interrupting people and people tell me I don't listen. I'd like to do better. I don't know quite how to do that. Can you help me? So that's really important. So you want to find tools to receive feedback neutrally, and then think about how to integrate that. And then the last thing is to set standards based on what matters to you, what has meaning and value for you, rather than outside determinations of achievement.
Yeah.
And success.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a really big one for a lot of us.
Right. I told you before we got on recording that I'd been away for, I was lucky enough to take a little vacation. And the second part of my vacation, I was on my own for 5 days. And it was so great to have a little space. And not everyone has the privilege of doing that. So I acknowledge it was a blessing for me. But what was great was I realized, I need to look at what's right in front of me, and I can look at where I've come from, but I don't need to look at this on what's side by side, And I think that's part of this perfectionism is we see what other people are doing, and we think, well, why can't I do that, or why aren't I doing that? Instead of noticing, compared to where I've been before, what I'm doing is fantastic for me.
Yeah. And giving yourself credit. I mean, it's such an important part and such a hard part for a lot of us. Absolutely. But well worth the work. Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts you want to share for our listeners? I think it's an important conversation to have. I think it's such a predominant problem, whether or not people identify it as perfectionism. It's such a predominant problem, in our ADHD tribe. And I think what you're sharing here could really be helpful for people.
So I've struggled with perfectionism, and in my 20s and my 30s, I'm older than that. I know that's hard to believe, but I am a little. I had a mentor who was a psychodrama teacher, and she taught me that real is better than perfect.
Yeah,
and I love this saying because nobody is perfect. It's an illusion. So we have to stop using that as the gold standard. If you think someone's perfect, then you're making a huge false assumption.
Yep.
You're comparing your insides to their outsides. Underneath their seemingly perfect exterior is a person just like you, with strengths and challenges, trying to be the best they can.
I love that. And Sharon and I are on video. I know you guys are just on audio, but there's a sign behind me that I made that says, if you were perfect, I would miss you. And that's what that's all about. It's the real parts of you that the people around you love and appreciate. It's the real parts of you that have value. That perfect stuff, that's not about the parts of you that are most impactful to other people, the parts of you that are the best parts of you. Mm-hmm. So when you're focused on being perfect all the time, you lose real and you lose you. And the world needs you. There's something about you. You were put on this earth to do something special, to bring something to the rest of the world, some kind of gift, some kind of talent. And when you're too focused on being perfect, you're robbing yourself and the rest of the world of those gifts. So that's I think this is a great
That
message.
is so beautifully said. Thank you, Lynn. I
I
love
love it. I love it. Well, thanks so much, Sharon. This has been awesome. Tell the listeners one more time where they can learn more about you.
Go to my website, www.drsharonsaline.com. Check me out on Facebook, Instagram, all the socials, and join me on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time through Attitude Magazine for my live Facebook sessions where you can ask a question and I will do my best to answer it.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much. And guys, if you found this helpful, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. The more 5-star reviews we have, the more people can find us. And if you want to keep the conversation going and connect with us and our other listeners, please feel free to join us in the ADHD Support Talk Facebook community. Thanks again for joining us, Sharon. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time on ADHD Support Talk.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Always my pleasure. Awesome.